Dr. Vorra Sulain had seen a lot of things in her 12 years working at the interspecies medical relay station on Orvith 9. She had watched a Brelthian sneeze so hard it dislocated its secondary spine. She had stitched together a Korvac diplomat after it had argued with a automatic door and lost, badly. She had even, on one very unforgettable Tuesday, performed emergency surgery on a Grellish elder who had somehow, through what she could only assume was a series of catastrophic life decisions, swallowed a communication device. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the morning a human named Dax Ferris walked through her medical bay door, bleeding from 3 separate locations, holding what appeared to be a snapped rib in place with one hand, and asked, with complete sincerity, whether the cafeteria on level 4 was still serving that spicy noodle dish. Vorra stared at him. Dax stared back. "The noodles," he repeated, as if she had simply not heard him. "I heard they only do them on Tuesdays. Is it still Tuesday?" Vorra's assistant, a young Pelrith med student named Obtu, made a sound that no medical text had ever thought to classify. It was somewhere between a gasp and a wheeze and possibly a prayer. "You are," Vorra said slowly, her translator working hard to keep up with the precise blend of disbelief and professionalism she was attempting, "bleeding from your shoulder, your left forearm, and what my scanner is currently telling me is a very concerning patch near your lower ribcage. You are also, and I say this with full clinical seriousness, holding yourself together with your own hand." Dax looked down. He considered the situation the way someone might consider a slightly overcooked piece of toast. Unfortunate. Correctable. Not worth canceling plans over. "Yeah," he said. "The rib thing happened about 40 minutes ago. The shoulder was before that. The arm is honestly, probably fine. I think it looks worse than it is." Obtu made the sound again. Vorra pressed 2 of her 4 fingers to what passed for her temple and breathed. In her species, this was a technique used to prevent spontaneous emotional overload. It was not working. "How," she said, "are you standing?" "1 foot in front of the other, mostly," Dax said. Then, because apparently he sensed she wanted more detail, he added, "Also I taped the shoulder back together with emergency adhesive from the maintenance kit in Corridor 7. There was a long silence. "Maintenance adhesive," Vorra said. "It holds hull panels in hard vacuum," Dax offered, as if this was a point in his favor. It was at that precise moment that Commander Yeth Doral walked into the medical bay looking for an update on his crew member and found his chief medical officer standing completely motionless, her scanner hanging loose in one hand, staring at a human who was sealed together with equipment rated for space debris repair. "Is he," Yeth began. "Alive?" "Yes," Vorra said. "Comprehensible?" "Technically." "Sensible?" "Absolutely not." Dax had by now sat himself down on the examination table without being asked and was inspecting his arm with the calm, detached interest of someone reading a mildly engaging article. "I did put pressure on the rib thing," he mentioned. "I know you are supposed to do that. You are supposed to come to medical." Obtu finally burst out. The young Pelrith had, until this moment, managed to maintain professional silence. His restraint had simply run out, apparently, somewhere around the maintenance adhesive revelation. Dax looked at him with an expression that was not unkind. "I was going to. I just had to finish the coolant flush on Deck 3 first. The whole ship overheats if you leave that mid-cycle." Yeth turned very slowly toward Vorra. "Is this a human thing?" "I am beginning to believe," Vorra said, pulling on her examination gloves with the weary precision of someone who had just completely rewritten their expectations of the next several hours, "that it is specifically a this human thing. Though my research is suggesting it may not be entirely unique to him." She began the formal scan. The results came in. She read them once. Then she read them again, because she was a professional and professionals confirm before they react. Then she set the scanner down, folded her hands, and looked at Dax Ferris with the expression of someone who had just discovered that the universe was, in fact, significantly stranger than advertised. You have 2 cracked ribs, she said. Not 1. 2. The second one you apparently did not notice. Dax blinked. Huh, he said. That explains the Tuesday. Nobody in the room knew what that meant. Nobody asked. Some answers, Vorra was learning, only made things worse. The thing about working with humans, Vorra had once read in a medical briefing distributed across 17 star systems, was that they had a peculiar relationship with pain. Not an absence of it. The briefing had been very specific about that. Humans felt pain just fine. They simply, and this was the part that had made Vorra read the sentence 4 times before accepting it, chose what to do about it on a case-by-case basis. Mostly based on whether they considered the pain sufficiently inconvenient. Dax Ferris, it was becoming clear, had a very high threshold for inconvenience. 2 cracked ribs, Vorra repeated, because she felt the situation deserved emphasis. 40 minutes ago. Give or take, Dax said. He was now lying flat on the examination table, which he had agreed to do only after she had pointed out that the alternative was her standing on a step platform to reach his shoulder, and he had found this funny enough to cooperate. It was a pressure seal failure in junction B9. The panel kicked back. Hard. And you completed the coolant flush, Vorra said. It was mid-cycle, Dax said again, as if this was a law of nature rather than a personal choice. Obtu had stopped making sounds. He had moved past sounds and entered a new phase of processing, which involved writing things down rapidly in his training journal with the energy of someone who understood that whatever happened in this room today was going to be a story he told for the rest of his career. Commander Yeth had pulled up a chair. He was not leaving. Nobody was leaving. The medical bay had, without anyone formally agreeing to it, become the most interesting place on the ship. Vorra began cleaning the shoulder wound. Dax watched the ceiling with the patient expression of someone sitting through a slightly long but ultimately acceptable presentation. Does this hurt? She asked. Sure, he said. On a scale, she began. I do not do scales, Dax said pleasantly. They stress me out more than the injury. Obtu wrote this down. Vorra moved to the arm. Up close, it was worse than it had looked from across the room, which she had privately suspected but had hoped was wrong. There were 3 distinct lacerations, one of which had clearly been bleeding steadily for long enough that his sleeve had gone entirely the wrong color. She looked at it. She looked at him. He was not looking at the arm. He was still looking at the ceiling. Dax, she said. This arm has been bleeding for how long? A pause. A thoughtful pause, which was somehow worse than an immediate answer. Since before the rib thing, he said finally. The rib thing was second. The room was quiet. So, Yeth said, from his chair, with the voice of a commander who was reconstructing a timeline he had not known he needed to reconstruct, you were already injured when the panel failed. Technically, Dax said. From what? Another pause. This one slightly longer. There was a disagreement, Dax said, between my arm and a cargo bracket. In loading bay 2. Earlier this morning. A disagreement, Vorra said. The bracket won, Dax admitted. But I got the cargo loaded. Obtu had stopped writing. He was simply staring now. His pen was hovering over the journal at a slowly increasing distance from the page, drifting upward with the gentle momentum of a being whose grip had loosened due to sheer accumulated disbelief. Vorra sealed the first laceration with practiced hands. Then the second. She worked in silence for a while, because she needed the silence. It was structural. It was holding her together the same way the maintenance adhesive had been holding Dax together, and she respected it accordingly. I am going to tell you something, she said eventually, as she began on the ribs, and I want you to hear it as a medical professional speaking to a patient and not as one crew member speaking to another. Okay, Dax said. You should have come here first. I know, he said. Any one of these injuries, on any of the 14 other species currently aboard this vessel, would have resulted in immediate incapacitation. The Brelthian on Deck 7 would have entered full systemic shock from the arm alone. The Korvac twins in engineering would have needed emergency sedation for the ribs. The Pelrith, she paused, glancing at Obtu, no offense, would have required a week of supervised recovery and probably a counselor. None taken, Obtu said faintly. Dax turned his head and looked at her. Not at the ceiling, not at the wall, but directly at her, with an expression that was quiet and genuine and unexpectedly thoughtful. I know it looks bad, he said. I know by everyone else's standards it probably is bad. But I grew up on a planet where the local wildlife genuinely tried to eat us 3 seasons out of 4. My grandmother broke her wrist setting a fence post and finished the fence before she went to the hospital. My dad once drove himself to the emergency room with a dislocated shoulder because, and I am quoting him directly here, the car was already running. Silence. Your planet, Yeth said slowly, tried to eat you. Seasonally, Dax confirmed. Obtu sat down on the floor. Not because there was no chair. There was a chair. He simply folded downward onto the floor with the quiet resolution of someone whose legs had made a unilateral decision. Vorra finished the rib treatment. She stepped back, removed her gloves, and looked at Dax Ferris, who was now, technically, held together by actual medicine rather than hull sealant and stubbornness. He looked, she noted with profound professional irritation, absolutely fine. Better than fine. He was already checking the time on his wrist display. You are on rest for 48 hours, she said. 24, he countered immediately. 48. 30. Dax. 36 and I eat the noodles in bed. Vorra stared at him for a long moment. Behind her, Yeth was covering his mouth with one hand in a way that was not quite hiding anything. Obtu, from the floor, let out a long, slow exhale that sounded like a being releasing something it had been carrying for far too long. 36 hours, Vorra said finally. And I am writing in your file that you are not to be allowed near maintenance panels unsupervised. Fair, Dax said. He sat up slowly, carefully, with only the mildest wince. Then he looked at her with complete earnestness and said, Thank you, document. You are really good at this. And Vorra, 12 years of experience, Chief Medical Officer of the Orvith 9 relay station, stood there for a moment and found, against every professional instinct she possessed, that she was almost smiling. Go eat your noodles, she said. He did. Obtu remained on the floor for another 4 minutes. Nobody mentioned it. Some recoveries, Vorra had learned today, simply took the time they took. Friends, if you are enjoying our videos and want to watch new and exciting sci-fi and HFY stories every day, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure to turn on the bell icon so you never miss any of our latest uploads. Like the video and share it with your friends as well, so our community can continue to grow and bring you even more amazing content.